Welcome to the show, Emboldened with Jessica. I'm Jessica, a mental health professional, and today we're going to be talking about family estrangement. This time of year, there's so many folks who are navigating anxiety or apprehension about being around family members who have no chill, who feel the need to say comments about our bodies, comments about who we love, comments about how we live our life. And sometimes it goes deeper than that in the sense that perhaps these family members have been harmful all of our lives, really harmful in a way that impacts our mental health, in a way that has caused us trauma that maybe we're still navigating or working to heal from. And so the holidays can be a beautiful, wondrous time, and they also can have their challenges. And for those who are challenged about being around family or perhaps the family of your partner, today we're going to really talk about ways to support yourself and some topics that come up quite a bit when we think about family estrangement. All right, welcome. So we're really fortunate today. We have a special guest. We have an expert that's going to be talking to us a little bit about family estrangement. So Madeline, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here.
So Madeline Moore, they, them pronouns, is an Afro-eclectic queer cosmic fairy that masks as a therapist and holds a license as an LCSW, trained in yoga therapy, somatic experiencing, EMDR, Haikomi, and co-regulating touch for trauma. They also run a body and ecology-oriented practice, Reishi Somatics, based out of Portland, Oregon. Their personal mission is to uplift Black, queer, and trans folks, to live in their truth and their innate joy and power. Thank you, Madeline, for joining us.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here.
We have all kinds of questions. I mean, when we're talking about family estrangement, this comes up a lot, especially around the holidays or times when folks might have to travel and be around family that might be a little bit difficult for them to navigate. In your experience as a therapist, what are some of the biggest reasons families end up in conflict?
Well, so I'll just give the context of the type of people that I support. And most of the people I support, they identify as either Black or Indigenous, or they identify as a person of color. And they might also hold the experience of being queer, being trans, being non-binary. And so often what I see is people are estranged because there's not a whole lot of understanding about the intersection of both of those experiences. I would also say that I've seen estrangement happen because of misunderstandings in terms of like value systems. I've seen estrangement happen because of difficulty blending families. I've seen estrangements happen because there's maybe an ongoing conflict or some embedded family trauma that makes it challenging for the folks in conflict to see or understand where each other are coming from. And yeah, there's, I think, a lot of common patterns are feeling of not being understood in families, feeling like attacked by family members can be another experience that happens when someone decides to make the decision to become estranged. And I would say it's not even really a decision that someone makes. Usually, most of the people I work with have tried to bridge the gap. So it's not really a choice. It's a non-choice. It's like you're backed in the corner, and that's the thing that is that's the only way through to kind of keep your sense of self and your peace intact.
Yeah, I think that's a really critical point, that folks who might be estranged from family, they have tried everything else, right? They've tried the different tools, the gray rocking, they've tried setting boundaries, and those boundaries weren't honored. They've tried to educate family members. And so it's kind of a last resort almost.
And I've seen estrangements will play out in all different kinds of ways depending on the relationships and the context. And so I've often seen in some of the people that I support that estrangement is is like, even when folks are making the decision to be estranged or they're having like a limited contact relationship, the harm is still occurring in whatever way that it might show up. But oftentimes the person who is estranged is just finding a different way to metabolize that harm,
Correct. Yeah.
which isn't great. But it makes a lot of sense when we start to better understand that we don't always know someone else's dynamic.
Yes. Yes.
Unless we're in it ourselves, we can't really know how it feels to be in that particular dynamic. And so I have a lot of compassion for people who have to make that decision to back away from family.
And even sometimes family who were in that dynamic, let's say they're siblings or, they're somehow related and they've seen some of the dysfunction, they might still choose a different way of being. And so sometimes even they won't understand. I'm curious about when we hear someone talking about going no contact with a family, can you break down what that actually looks like in real life? What is the term estrangement? What does the term no contact mean for those that maybe are a little bit less familiar with it?
Yeah, so estrangement is the process of deciding to separate from your family of origin, whether that's from your entire family or from a parent or parents or siblings. It's deciding that the relationship is no longer healthy and beneficial, and you are choosing to kind of cut your losses and just live your life as a separate solo being entity. And a lot of times going no contact can look various ways. I've had people who just kind of silently phase out, and their family members might, really wonder or question. For example, I have a number of folks who are Black or people of color that have been adopted by white families.
Mm,
And it's really complicated and complex for them to try and understand or explain racism that they experience,
mhm.
especially in light of 2020 and when these conversations have kind of come more into the foreground. So in those instances, I've supported a few people who I don't think would mind me sharing that they just decided to kind of like ghost. It's like too big of a conversation.
Yes, that's laborious.
Yeah, it's like the avenues aren't there,
Mhm.
and you're gonna be damned if you do, damned if you don't. So
Mhm, correct.
the best way to deal with that is like, I'm just gonna like silently move out of state and live my life. And maybe I will contact you when a holiday rolls around, but I might not. And then I've also seen no contacts happen where there's more of a formal conversation. Maybe there's been a bid to go to therapy. Maybe there's been kind of pulling in of other family members to try and support. And it comes to the point where someone just makes a formal announcement to the family that I'm no longer wanting to be part of this.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and I don't think either outcome is easy, but it exists across the spectrum. And if you're someone who is feeling like you're playing with the idea of estrangement or feeling more and more like that might be the best thing for keeping your peace and maintaining your sanity, you can have it look any way that really feels best for you.
I'm curious also if we were to go back a step and think about before it gets to the point of family estrangement, when there's this reoccurring kind of family conflict that just never seems to get resolved, like when we're communicating our needs, it's not being heard. What are some practical steps that you advise the folks that you work with to take to kind of break that cycle of hurt?
Yeah. What's coming up for me is to think about like, there's like a part of me that wants to jump in and be like, here's the things you can do. And then there's the other part of me that's like, oh, everyone's context is so different. So I'm just kind of holding both of those experiences that like I can give some practical steps, and also like they may not fit for the listener's context, and that's okay too. And if it doesn't fit, that doesn't mean that that means that there's a different way, a different map that you might use to move forward.
I think that that's brilliant, right? So when it's a really great therapist, there's no one size fit all kind of approach. It's really exploring what does that person, what is the individual you're working with or you're working alongside, what is it that they're hoping to have happen? What is their, what are their goals? And then
Mhm.
kind of working together and some different tools based off of what their desired outcome really is. Because for some people, it's, I'm already tired and exhausted. I don't have the energy to even get out of bed, let alone try to map out how to improve this relationship. And that's fair and valid. And for some people, the relationship really, really matters, maybe with one person, maybe not the other family. And so then there's an approach that's based off of that one family member. So yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
what you're describing is what a really great therapist would do.
Yeah, and I really love hearing what you added to that because there's like the nuance and complexity of it. And there's also what's coming up for me is like kind of an invitation for folks to go slow and to examine their own expectations within their family and how their expectations might fit or not fit the actual people that they're in a family relationship with.
Hmm.
And I feel like that's another big part of doing the work of like when you choose to pursue an estrangement, there's work that you're going to do on your end to grieve the loss
Yeah.
of the idealized family that you might have wanted.
Hmm.
And of course, that's going to be deep. There's going to be a lot of there can be a lot of pain there, but it's also important to recognize like some of the expectations that we might have grown up thinking that a family should be or is, or thinking that our family should provide for us.
Hmm.
Um, when our family is made up, and oftentimes for like communities of color, it's like they're made up of people who have had to navigate cis heteropatriarchy for a long time,
Hmm.
had to
Correct.
navigate racism, had to navigate, poverty, have had to navigate real circumstances. And those circumstances have created trauma that have like kind of altered the foundation of what a healthy family could be for a community of color.
Hmm.
So I really appreciate that framing of like kind of checking expectations, slowing down to kind of see like what behaviors or what things are tolerable
Hmm.
and what things are like really obliterating non-negotiables that would warrant you to no longer be in contact with them. And so I think, yeah, physical abuse, any kind of like ongoing verbal abuse, like absolutely cut that out. But if there's any room for gray area, it might be worth kind of slowing down to examine what a functional relationship could look like.
Knowing that that person probably isn't going to change a whole lot. But
Yeah.
yeah, ooh, that's something else. I like how you're discussing that there's some grief that is involved in this kind of work. And I
Mm-hmm.
think sometimes we don't really allow space for a person to consider what that might look like and if they're ready for that and what kind of things might support them in their grief. I'm also curious about how does a person handle the guilt or pressure when people around them might say things like, but that's your mom, or you have to forgive them. You should be the bigger person. How do you navigate what other people have to say about your family dynamic?
Oh, yeah, I love this question. Especially this idea that like the person going no contact, that there's some measure of emotional immaturity. I would say that the experience of going no contact is devastating,
Yes.
deeply devastating. And if you're someone who is holding space for a friend or a loved one that's going through this process, the best thing you can do is just to listen as
Mhm.
non-judgmentally as you can. I think that yeah, this idea that like you have to be the bigger person. I think my personal orientation is to think about the nature of a parent-child relationship and to understand that like parents hold a lot of responsibility in bringing a child into the world.
Talk about it.
I'm just of the personal belief that it is never the child's responsibility to make amends or to take care of or to be responsible for their parent.
Mhm.
And that's a challenging one, particularly because we're bringing, like for me, it's like bringing in that language of consent.
Yes.
Your child doesn't. it is not a non-consensual arrangement here. You are drawing them in. They're very vulnerable, and you're responsible for them for the early years and onward into their adult life.
Mhm.
And that even that early childhood relationship into adult years doesn't end. You never stop being someone's parent.
And I also think about it's this is like such a I don't know, such a big topic in the sense of, especially when we're talking about people of color and
Hmm.
the respect dynamic with elders, right? And
Hmm.
so even though you might both be adults, even though you're the child at some point, you might be an adult now, there's still this power, right, with
Hmm.
an elder and this belief around how you're supposed to conduct yourself, talk to, protect the emotional well-being of the elder,
Hmm.
at your cost, right? At the cost of your mental health, the cost of your safety, your felt sense of safety. And so there's that, it's very deeply entrenched in a number of cultures. And so even navigating that dynamic is extremely challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's as you're pointing that out, I'm thinking about like how many people are bristling at the idea that like children don't owe adults anything.
Correct?
And that, I'm with you. I was raised in a Black household. You do not
Mhm.
talk back to your elders. You show the utmost respect. And I feel like that comes on the heels of elders being in a position in their eldership where they're trying to model the kind of relationship that they want to have with their children. And I was struck by a friend of mine. We were talking about this topic a few weeks ago, and she had shared that she felt like she grew up and never saw a real life healthy dynamic of a Black family.
Wow.
And it's I just that's like a very layered
Correct.
that's a
Yeah.
very layered, very I even feel a little
Very
bit like,
telling.
oh, I don't know if I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this.
It's the
I don't know
truth,
who's
right? And so
listening,
that
but
isn't that part of the belief, right? That we're not
yeah.
allowed to talk about these things.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of colonial paradigms that, some of these elders have. And so what they're wanting us
Mhm.
to emulate is not what would have been our original family structure, but really this colonial family structure that did allow people to
Absolutely.
survive. I get why they have learned to be that way because it allowed them to survive. So that's the context. But we're now in a different kind of season and time where those things that allowed our previous ancestors to survive, they're no longer serving us. It's a really tough thing to navigate, but I believe in telling the truth. And the truth is there is a lot of family dysfunction.
Yeah, and it's like it's such a heavy, I mean, part of the grief is like recognizing that maybe even for parents who are navigating estrangement, there's just the grief of recognizing that like you're not quite the parent that you had hoped you would be, or that veneer, doesn't really hold up
Mhm.
despite all that you put into care for this person. And that is heavy.
It is. I was doing some self-touch, okay? I was distressed. I said, "Oh, we going there?"
Yeah, I know. I just felt my stomach drop. I'm like, "Ooh, let's get low to the ground,
Yeah.
everybody."
The holidays can be really tough in general with being around a lot of families, the expectation of trying to make it feel magical and special, and the
Mhm.
cost. What are some ways to protect one's peace during all the festive chaos?
Yeah, I also really love this question. So, if you're queer, I feel like there's a lot of magic in creating your own celebrations and holidays
Yes.
throughout the year that are divorced from these kind of mega conglomerate holidays that
Mhm.
kind of push this narrative of family togetherness and can feel really isolating. So I would highly suggest or encourage people to explore like what things they can start to create a celebration around in your own life that is a reason to bring people together and to feel special. And then as far as like other ways to protect your peace, taking a lot of distance from maybe the typical spaces that you would go during the holidays if you can. I also think that if you're spending time around family, if there's a way to like kind of find breaks or find outs or
Yes.
find a different place to stay in the Airbnb or stay with a
Mhm.
friend, a family friend, or someone, if you can, that's not directly staying in your home.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, this is like a whole other thing, but I think about implicit memory, and it can be really hard to be in alignment with who you are in your regular life when you're brought back into the current of the life that you lived with your family. So
Yes.
there's a lot of grace there if you show up around your family dinners and you're like, suddenly I told myself I was not going to get in this shouting match, and here we are.
Hello. Yes, it activates like this younger, less evolved version of us that we thought we had parted from. And then a lot of times we end up being surprised. But you're right, like it's being in that environment, it's being around people who know our like our soft spots, right? They
Yeah,
know the things that might be really activating for us. And, they know how to poke those buttons. And so I love this idea of thinking about ways to kind of shield yourself going into it so that you have an out, another place to stay. I love also encouraging clients to maybe even if they can have a partner that is there,
mhm.
someone that can help them to take a break if they need it. Like a space in the home that they can go to and have some quiet, or to be able to say, I need to take this call for work, and be able to get in their car if they need to. But being able to have it out is so important, especially if there's been some trauma and in that
Mhm.
home or with those folks, and knowing that you could feel really activated. But what is a way that I can kind of take care of myself while I'm in this environment?
Exactly. And really prioritizing that, because I imagine if you are someone who's navigating the waters of family estrangement, you're also doing some kind of healing work. And
Mhm.
so just protecting, remember like it's okay for you to protect your soft spots. It's okay for you to find ways to create distance, because maybe the outcome there is like just to make it through without maybe the same old cycles or patterns repeating themselves. And it doesn't need to be magical, it doesn't need to be special, but it's like maybe just about for you showing up and honoring your family in whatever way that makes sense to you, and choosing to kind of step back when you need to.
Going in the opposite direction. Let's say there's someone that you had for reasons were estranged from, and it's been a while, and maybe you're starting to kind of really miss that family member, or starting to think, is it time for me to reconsider, and maybe I can try to repair the relationship? What are some things we might consider if we're thinking about trying to reach back out to a family member we haven't spoken to in a while?
Yeah, I think I'm balancing experiences that people have shared with me, and then like just a personal experience. I have a sister that I've been estranged from for about 5 years, and had a baby and was kind of like, oh, maybe this is the time. And I would say that just based off of my own experience and some of the things that I've heard from other folks is I think the key thread through this call, I feel like, has been looking at expectations and just understanding that like there's gonna there's still gonna be a ripple effect from the choice to go no contact or to pull back from your family. I am all about balancing hope with like a spoonful of more than a spoonful of reality. And so I think, you can maybe feel into the places where the relationship might be able to shift, and also just be ready for it to be the same, or if not, like maybe a little less than what you're hoping for. I think that it can be really tough because a lot of times people, family members might not fully understand or know why you make the decisions that you make. And in truth, just thinking from like a nervous system perspective, I think it's hard for people to even be able to have the conversations about the things to like
Mm.
get to the place where healing could happen. And that's not to say like, I mean, I've heard stories too of people finding a way through and establishing new relationships that feel like there's more space for understanding. But initially, I would say if you go back and you want to try to contact them, lean into your gut and your discernment, and then also
Mhm.
know that if it doesn't work out, you can also reverse that decision too and decide to go no contact again, or it doesn't have to stay stuck. And you're welcome to think that there's a lot of flexibility around that. And if it's not feeling like you made the right decision, it's like reaching out to like an ex-boyfriend. You're like, oh,
Yes, that's
right
what I'm
here,
thinking.
here's
Yes.
all the here's all the things. This is why.
Uh-huh.
And maybe something shift and you're like, you know what? You were actually a cool person and we can vibe, but like,
I think you're exactly
yeah.
right. What kind of work has happened in between the time with me, with that person? Has anything been resolved? Or, I don't know. There's so much to consider, but that grieving is hard. It's really hard to not be in contact with people we're really accustomed to, whether it was a healthy relationship or not. And likely it was not a healthy relationship. We'll still miss aspects of that. And I like the idea that, because you change your mind doesn't mean you can't change it again. If you find out that, ooh, wow, this is still a really bad situation for me. And I also like doing it in stages. So if that looks like maybe I start to send them a birthday card again, or maybe I will send them an email to check in, or, like doing kind of little stages of maybe reacquainting, like putting your toes in the water to see, like, is the response healthy and appropriate? Is it not? Does it feel good to interact with this person? Am I feeling really anxious? And then kind of navigating from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are all really great ways to test the waters, and the relationship doesn't need to think it's maybe coming to terms with like the desire for that closeness,
Hmm.
and that that relationship, whoever you're reaching out to, may not have the closeness that we're hoping for, that like is the ideal within a family system. Um, but there can be some very low stakes way of maintaining some kind of relationship. I know for me personally, to share a little bit more about the experience I had contacting my sister, we're two very different people, but there's kind of the connection of staying engaged with my niece, who's her daughter.
Oh, okay.
That feels like a way through where we don't necessarily have to be in relationship with each other and talk about all the stuff that's hard about our family or about our relationship. And I think she feels appreciative of the relationship that I'm trying to forge with her daughter. So it's kind of like a silent, it's like that silent head nod. Just like,
Yes.
okay, all right, we're not going to go there. We can't talk
Mhm.
about it, but I see what you're trying to do, and I'm just going to leave space for it. I think all those ways of all the ways that you named could be really good kind of entry ways to building a relationship that's really just neutral.
So I'm curious. I'm always curious because I'm nosy. I like to know all the things. Are there any other nuggets of wisdom or tips you can share for those navigating the tricky waters of family estrangement?
Yeah, I was thinking about the question around holidays and holiday
Mhm.
times. And a number of folks I work with have the experience where oftentimes people in estranged in situations of estrangement can feel like it maybe it's taking time for them to build up their personal relationships, or friendships can feel kind of dicey or insecure at times. So, when it comes to the holidays, one of the things that I suggest to the people that I support is lean into volunteering.
Yes.
Yeah, it could be just another way to be around people and kind of have this semblance of like community, a feel of people coming together for something larger that doesn't
Mhm.
have all the same like kind of twinges as like a family event does. And I think that can be a really great way to meet like-minded people who are just kind of oriented to community and oriented to supporting other folks.
I need to know more about the Rishi somatics and the Haikomi and co-regulating touch for trauma.
Yeah. So Reishi Somatics is the name of my practice in Portland, Oregon, named after reishi mushrooms, which are just they're an incredible being of like they impart so much longevity to people.
Okay.
So you can take reishi mushrooms in tinctures or teas, and in Chinese medicine, that's been one of the mushrooms that's like really about preserving whole body, whole being health.
Wow.
It's also I have an ongoing Dungeons and Dragons campaign with my partner
Nice.
and his son and our daughter, and Reishi is also the name of my character. So I was like, I'm just gonna go with this for my
Uh,
business.
have you seen the therapists that'll do like D&D therapy groups?
Yes, yeah. I
Mhm.
have a good friend that does some of those. I'm like kind of new to the D&D world.
Uh-huh.
They kind of pulled me into it and I was like, okay, I could get down with this. Let me just like scheme up who I want to be, which is like a
Yes.
traveling healer that's obsessed with mushrooms and also makes music.
Oh, cool. There's so much in the D&D character that is parts of us or parts of us we would like there to be. So there's just so much there,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, so as far as the other stuff, Hakomi is another type of somatic therapy approach. It's not so centered around trauma, but it is centered around mindful awareness and using mindful awareness in the safe space of a therapy room to
Mm.
work through difficult past experiences. So I've been studying that for about like 8 years now,
Wow.
and then co-regulating touch. I took a training this past year with Kathy Kane and was just blown away because as we're moving into more of like a digital fast-paced lifestyle, and a lot of the people that I work with that are navigating estrangement have the experience where they're like, I have been in therapy for years. I've gone to every kind of therapist. I've done CBT, DBT, and nothing works. And
Mhm.
it's wild to me that, you can offer someone a hand placed on their kidneys, or you can
Mm.
offer someone a hand placed, at the back of their neck, on their brainstem. And the body is like, oh, we know what to do.
Yeah.
So touch is very powerful, and there's a deep, there's like I just think of yeah, I can't help but think of images of going to church and kind of seeing that visual of like people laying hands on. That might not be the exact same thing that's happening.
But it is a similar thing, right? And it speaks to some of the like cultural indigenous
Mhm.
practices that we have had, and maybe not
Yeah.
always knowing the impact of it or the meaning behind it, and being told by colonial people that like, oh, that's the devil. And so,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
we've not always known the history or valued some of those practices that are just really healing, like being in a church and praise dancing, that repetitive movement, or even
Yes.
the clapping. That so yeah, absolutely. I could totally see that visual.
Yeah, I mean, even Hakomi and somatic experiencing, they come from indigenous traditions.
Thank you for sharing that because I know that you do a lot of decolonizing therapy work, and I just think it's really important work, and not a lot of folks are engaged in it or have heard much about it. So I just wanted to be able to share a little bit more with listeners about that.
Yeah, yeah, I'm really happy to talk about it. I feel like, I'm sure you can relate to this too, as someone who's studying these practices and starting to bring them into work with your clients. It's like we're kind of just going in and getting the medicine and then bringing it back to the people that actually need it.
Mhm. Yeah. It's wild. Well, and how much it has been gate kept. Any final thoughts that you want to share with the for the good of the
Mhm.
group?
I think I just wanted to speak to anyone who is navigating estrangement, encourage people to lean into the practice of grief. And I say the practice of it because it's more than just kind of feeling the heaviness of it. The practice of grief also includes leaning into and making space for the practice of joy.
Yes.
And the more that we can do that in small pieces, and over however much time it takes you, there's no rush for your healing.
Mhm.
Um, the more that you might find there's really valuable gifts on the other side of making the choice that you make to pull back from your family. I saw this meme on, it wasn't a meme, it was like a reel that someone had posted on Instagram, and it was talking about how, the people who have to walk this path are some of the most blessed and cared for people by spirit
Mhm.
because it really challenges your ability to walk through the world holding truth in the face of like a community of people who might not be able to see that, and that's
Mhm.
really powerful, deeply powerful.
It is. I think grief puts things in perspective in a different kind of way. Listen to my voice. It's even just lowering thinking about it. I mean,
Mm,
it kind of helps us to think about how do we want to spend our time? How do we want to
mm,
show up? It just puts it all into a lot of perspective. And actually, when it comes to family estrangement, that is one of the things I'll talk to clients about. If this person were to pass and you weren't talking to them, would that impact you? Um,
mm,
Not would it impact you, but are you comfortable with it? So,
mhm,
on a personal note, for myself, I was estranged from my mother,
mm,
and she did pass, and
mm,
I was. I'm still comfortable with the decision that I made at the time to be estranged from her, but it is something that people need to think about, because at any
yeah,
moment something happened to anyone. And so it's a consideration. And so I appreciate you bringing that up because as we're talking about living in a way that honors your needs, where you're not being harmed by people, thinking about grief is, I think, certainly a really important part of it that sometimes we don't really talk about. As therapists, as people in general, we live in a society where we don't really like talking about grief or death.
yeah, especially now is like we're going through so much, there's so much to grieve on a daily basis. I mean, I think there's so much power in it, and I really appreciate hearing your perspective on it too, and your experience. It's powerful.
So, Madeline, can you tell us how someone can connect with you if they want to be able to be lucky enough to do some work with you?
Yeah, if you're local in Portland, Oregon, you can connect with me through Psychology Today. And I also have a website and an Instagram account for Reishi Somatics. If you're not local to Oregon and want to just follow, things I'm interested in, thinking about, blog posts, that kind of stuff, which I think will be linked in the show notes.
Thank you so much. So, for our cozy book nug, there's three books that I recommend. The first is Mother Hunger: How Adult Daughters Can Understand and Heal from Loss, Nurturance, Protection, and Guidance. That book is by Kelly McDaniel. In this book, there's some practical steps and strategies for really healing trauma or pain that was caused by experiences with a maternal figure. So, Mother Hunger. The second book is Children of the Self-Absorbed, A Grown-Up's Guide to Getting Over Narcissistic Parents, and that's by Nina W. Brown. There's a few versions of this book. I think we're in the third revision, so I'd recommend that one. Now, again, we're not diagnosing our loved ones or our parents, but if you have some pretty self-absorbed parents and you need some support in navigating them, this book really talks about the patterns and behaviors of narcissistic parents. I think this is really helpful for some people because sometimes they think about it as, is it just me? Am I overreacting? This parent has, provided shelter for me over the years. This parent has supported me on and off. And while those things might feel like the bare minimum, and in some cases they were, that those are the things your parents were legally required to do, it's helpful to know what some of the patterns really are that are harmful. And then for you to have the tools to see, how do I want to navigate this, having some of the language that I didn't have before, knowing a little bit more than I knew before. The third book that I really recommend is called Drama Free, A Guide to Managing Unhealthy Family Relationships, and that's by Nedra Glover Twab. I've recommended her Set Boundaries, Find Peace book in the past, which is also an excellent resource. But this one is different in that it's a toolkit. So how to navigate these family challenges or the drama, what are some actionable steps that I can use to create distance if I'm going to be around them so that I can be healthy and cope? One of the things we talked about in our interview today with Madeline was the guilt that arises as we start to think about family estrangement, as we start to think about going no contact. And so this book gives some tools on how to navigate some of that guilt that might emerge. And then also, really, how do you foster self-care in the midst of some challenges? Even in a very healthy family, there's drama that happens or things that come up. And so while these tools are more guided towards unhealthy family relationships, another incredible resource I highly recommend. Are you enjoying the show? Subscribe and review to let us know what you think, and share this episode with a friend in your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for listening to Emboldened with Jessica. If you want to keep up with us, follow Emboldened with Jessica on Instagram. Until next time.